Good evening. My name is Dr. Joseph Burkes, and you are listening to Epic Voyages on the Inception Radio Network. Tonight we're going to be discussing the Holy Bible, the book Alien Scriptures, Extraterrestrials in the Holy Bible. And we have with us Reverend Michael Carter. And we're going to be talking not only about his book, but about his many extraterrestrial close encounters. This is the first time I've opened a radio show with a quote from the book of the person I'm interviewing, but the writing in his book is so profound, and he has such a positive message that I wanted to start off by reading the opening pages of his book, Alien Scriptures. Michael Carter writes, quote, "In the beginning was the Word," John 1. "In the beginning was the Word, and these words are a testimony from me, Michael J.S. Carter, about my positive and enlightening contact experiences with extraterrestrial life, and how these experiences have transformed not only my worldview, but my life. These experiences continue to resonate in my life and have made me, at least in my humble opinion, a better human being. I welcome to Epic Voyages, Michael Carter. Good evening."
Good evening. Thank you for having me on. It's my pleasure to be here.
Well, it's for both of us. I was introduced to you by our mutual friend,
Yes.
Ray Hernandez, who you just got off the phone with.
I just got off the phone with him. He's got some new projects coming up. He's going to be making a presentation at Yale with a few other writers on the nature of consciousness in relation to this phenomenon that we are talking about. And both of you are doing great work. You are affirming the experiences of people who have been in contact with off-world intelligences and trying to bring that message to the world. And for some reason, which I can understand, if it's not scientifically validated, then it's not real. Both of you, Ray, and you, Dr. Burkes, are coming from a more holistic view, if you will, body, mind, and spirit. And if I dare use the word, a more spiritual perspective. So I salute you both. But yeah, I just got off the phone with Ray about 30 minutes ago.
And Ray is the co-founder of the organization, Foundation for Research into Extraterrestrial Encounters.
Yes, free.
So and we've had him on the show, and I think it would be good to have him back, especially after he goes to a prestigious university
to Yale.
And presents a paper. Yes. Very good. So let's talk a little bit about your background. I understand that you grew up in Baltimore, is that right?
Yeah, that's where I'm from. Yep.
And you're an ordained interfaith minister.
Yes, indeed.
You received your BA degree in letters from the College of New Rochelle, where I should say that you graduated with cum laude. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And you also received a master's in divinity from the Union Theological Seminary and have served as a staff chaplain for hospitals in New York City. I want to just mention to the audience, in case you don't pick up my accent, I was born and raised in Manhattan and had to learn to speak without a New York accent after moving to California. And so we have a lot to share in terms of what it's like to be in the most exciting, dynamic city on the East Coast of the United States.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit about your background. You grew up in Baltimore, isn't that right?
Yes.
And then
I grew up in Baltimore, yeah.
And then you went on to study acting, is that right?
Yeah, I was a professional actor in New York for a good number of years. Honing my craft, as it were. I was on scholarship at Dance Theater of Harlem and Alvin Ailey dance studios, and then I did some soap work on the East Coast soaps in New York. I did some off-Broadway and summer stock and some print modeling, that kind of thing. I get a pension So I was in the unions, and I haven't collected it yet. I'm trying to hold out, but I do
Is
get a pension from one of the theatrical unions.
is that Actors Equity, or is that
I was in Equity, SAG, and AFTRA. My
uh,
pension is in AFTRA. That's the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists.
well, congratulations.
Oh,
But
thank you.
but but then something happened in, I think it was 1989. Is that right? In
Yes,
Dec- in
yes.
December, here you are, a young man with all kinds of terrestrial responsibilities, your acting career, your friendships,
Yeah,
family, and then
yeah.
something happened on, I think it was the 28th of December,
Oh my goodness!
1989.
Yes, you've done the homework. Yeah, December 28th, '89. I wanted to leave the theater. Um, I was frustrated because I wanted to serve, and it's hard to serve when you're looking for work all the time, which I was as an actor in New York. And at that time, um, I started reading. I was raised Baptist, and I was. Um, I just started thinking outside of the box, reading existentialist philosophy, Hinduism, Buddhism, just the whole gamut, just opening my mind. And I think that probably prepared me for the encounter to a degree. Um, we had come back, my girlfriend at the time, who wound up being my first wife, we had come back from the Yucatan Peninsula, seeing the pyramids at Chichen Itza and Tulum. And we flew back, and a friend of mine who lived in Hell's Kitchen actually asked me to come to a party. And I was tired, but it was freezing. I wanted to show off my tan. I had just come back from Mexico. So I went. I caught the subway and stayed for about an hour and a half. No alcoholic beverages, no adult beverages, had some deviled eggs, what have you. Made an appearance and then caught the subway, the number one, back uptown. And so that evening, I sleep on my stomach to this day, but I sensed a presence in the room. And I turned around. Now we're talking about the Excelsior Hotel, right, between Columbus and the park. That's where we were living, in that residential hotel. And there was a being in my room. My girlfriend either could not or would not wake up. This being was surrounded by a cobalt blue light, and around it was like an aura, was this really, really bright white light. Now, this being was not gray. It had the phenotype of what we would call a gray, but it was more like a chalk color, very thin, had on a jumpsuit, tight-fitting jumpsuit, that looked like Reynolds wrap. Very spindly head, a pear-shaped head, the wraparound eyes, they looked like Ray-Ban eyes, I called them at the time. And I just thought I was going to have a heart attack. I just can't tell you any. Words cannot explain, describe the fear. And it looked at me, and I don't know whether it was male or female. I'll say it was a brother. This brother stared at me, and I stared at him. And I thought my heart was going to come out of my chest. He was about maybe 4 feet tall, tops. I put the covers over my head. Okay, I'm not a macho man, okay? So I just pulled the covers up over my head, hoping this brother would go away. And when I put the covers up over my head, I heard this whoosh, this swishing sound, almost as if I was outside. I felt the temperature change. Now, we're talking December of the 15th floor of the Excelsior Hotel. When I pulled the covers down, no one was there. No
Wow.
one was there.
What an introduction to that. Now, you've been asked this question before, and what preparation did you have for this in terms of an interest perhaps in UFO studies? Had you ever had a sighting before?
No.
What was this was
This was hot off the press, brand new. Now, when I was a kid, I used to have these orbs in my room, but I couldn't connect the dots whether they were off-world intelligences or not. I thought everybody saw them. And they would float. Some of them, they would be like the color of chakras, a blue, um, an apple green. And they would float around, and I would just stare at them. I used to wake up with nosebleeds as a kid, but I had no reference point. So December 28th, 1989, as an adult, for me, now, like I said, the things that happened when I was 8 or 9, they could have all been related. But this is the first time. I told people I didn't believe in UFOs. And you know what reason I gave them, Joe? Because it wasn't in the Bible.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what a difference 20, 30 years makes. Because now I'm trying to convince people that the Bible is full of UFO experiences and contacts. But that I had no reference point. After that incident, after that contact, I read everything I could. I went to a support group. I was voracious. I was addictive. I was spending $200-300 dollars a month probably for a year and a half on books on this phenomenon, because that's what I do when I get interested in something. I exhaust the topic. But I was trying to get a handle on what was going on. I wound up initially going to be regressed by Dr. Jean Mundy, who's since gone on to life after life. She lived on Long Island. I found her name in the back of a book called Encounters by Edith Fiore. Wonderful book. And in the back of it, it had a list of mental health professionals. And then I had done a conference with Bud Hopkins on Long Island. And when I met Bud asked me if I wanted to be regressed. I said, yeah, why not? Let's see what else comes up. Now, we had a fundamental difference in the way we viewed it. Bud was more doom and gloom. He's my brother. He's gone on. It just wasn't my perspective. It was more stereotypical, bordering xenophobic, and I was more in the camp of Brother John Mack.
Right. We'll get into that later on in the show. But tell me how you found Edith Fiore's book, because that's an interesting part of the story as well.
Well, what had happened was I called a good friend of mine who was an astrologer, and she lived in Alphabet City, and I was trying to describe to her the brother that I saw in my room, and she said to go down to Avenue C and 5th Street, and there was a wall. Someone had done some graffiti, and she said, tell me if those beings look like, and someone had painted some ETs on this wall, and it looked like the people I saw. And so I decided to go to the Strand bookstore on Spring Street, and I bought some books. And I was a wreck. I wasn't sleeping because they were coming every full and new moon for about 6 to 8 months. And it was very scary. But that's not because of them, but because of my fear, because they never did anything really untoward to me. But I digress. So I went and I go up to the counter, and there was this guy there. He had really long dreadlocks, and I wouldn't look him in the face. And I put all these books on the counter, and he said, got a lot of books there. I said, yeah. He said, is this a hobby or is this the real thing? And it took me a while to answer him, and I said, this is the real thing. And he gave me the phone number to a group called Space. Harold Eglin was the leader of that group. And I called them, and I told them about my experiences, and they said, you'll be safe here. And that's how I went, and I met wonderful people. But even then, there was a little difference. It was Bud's group, and then there was our group. So we were like two sides of the same coin. Most of the people, if not all, in my group thought their experiences were positive. And of course, we know Bud people were very traumatized. And I think once or twice we even got together. We even got people who wanted to get together. I got together with Bud, with Bud's group. But again, it was just two different ways of looking at the world.
For sure. And this was so new to you that you really didn't want a whole lot of people to know that this had happened. Is that correct?
Oh, no, I couldn't tell any. Oh, no. No, especially in the church, because at that time, well, it's a little different now, but at that, oh, no, 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 no. I couldn't do it.
We're talking now almost 30 years ago, 1989, 1990.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, no, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. I remember telling a friend of mine who was a Unitarian Universalist minister, we did a lot of anti-racism work and social justice work around diversity together. And I mentioned it to her. And she said, Michael, I believe that you believe what you're saying is true. She said, but if you want to have a career in this denomination as a minister, don't ever tell anybody what you told me.
Wow. That's quite chilling.
Yeah.
You also were recognized by a high government official, I think, because of your anti-racism and diversity work. Is that right?
Yeah, then President Clinton. I used to travel around the country. We were trained by the Unitarian Universalist Association. This was during Bill Clinton's administration, and we were asked to come in by several churches, and I was at a church in New Jersey. Forget that it's a UU church, a very humanist church. Ridgewood, New Jersey. I'll never forget it now. Yeah. And someone from the White House was in the Sunday service. And I spoke that Sunday after a workshop. And I went to church one day, and in my mailbox there was a letter from the White House, and this official had been there and was very effusive in her praise. I was very proud. And then a few weeks later, I had gotten a letter from President Clinton thanking me for the work I was doing to try to build bridges instead of walls.
Well, I think you still are building bridges, because when we talk about diversity, we usually think of it in terms of what's diverse here on this planet. But I imagine with this extraterrestrial issue, we are reaching out and experiencing diversity that's much broader than just this planet. We're talking about off-world cultures, off-world intelligence. And when I think about my participation in peace movement during my youth, I think of our efforts at promoting contact and UFO truth as being basically a cosmic type of peace movement. And I think of our efforts to celebrate our contact experiences as brotherhood and sisterhood made large.
I would agree with that. I would definitely agree with that.
But this was not something that you could easily share. And what was the reaction to your partner, the young lady who eventually became your first wife? Was she able to handle that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, she was very mystical anyway. She was born Jewish, very liberal, even Reformed Judaism. It was interesting because her father, who became my father-in-law, was very Orthodox, but he and I got along famously. No, she was very open to that, very much so. As a matter of fact, she, along with these encounters, they accelerated my spiritual growth. I learned unconditional love from this woman.
Oh. Well, that's very supportive indeed.
Loved me at my worst. Loved me at my worst, and so it was not a problem.
Tonight you're at your best, and we're talking, for those people who are tuning in, we're talking to Reverend Michael Carter, and he is sharing with us the insights that he has also put into a book called Alien Scriptures: Extraterrestrials in the Holy Bible. What I found fascinating about your story was that you became more spiritual after you had your close encounters. I understand that you decided to go into becoming a minister after this happened. Is that correct?
Yeah. Now, Ray and I were just talking about this. As a kid, and I don't know whether it was a past life bleed through, probably was to a degree, but I always knew I wanted to be a priest. It was so familiar to me. It was something I knew I'd done before. Always very, very comfortable. Any type of, whether it's a mosque, whether it's a Hindu temple, whether it's a sangha, I just kind of ebbed and flowed. It was just I was just so comfortable, and then I thought about being a therapist, but I knew, which is kind of a secular priest in these days and times, but I knew that I was going to be giving a message, and I went into the theater thinking I was going to be Denzel Washington or somebody, but actually what it did was it prepared me for my work as a clergy person, and I tell my friends when I was in the theater, I was in the business of creating illusions. Now I'm in the business of trying to dispel them.
Excellent. And what made you go into to become an interfaith minister?
Basically because I knew that there was more than one way to get to wherever folks wanted to go. The Baptist, and I don't want to, it just didn't work for me. I'm not saying it's wrong or right. It just wasn't wrong. It wasn't right for me. This kind of myopic view that if you didn't believe whatever that, and so I was meeting people who were atheists. I was meeting people who were Hindi and what have you, and it was hard for me to reconcile that if there is a God, and that's just the word I'm using right now. Then what happens to these other good folk who are living the good life, who are trying to love their neighbor? Are they going to be barbecued? Are they going to be burned in hell? Because, and I just couldn't roll with it intellectually anymore, and so I had to just shake the dust off my feet, take the good that came with that. And I know wonderful people who still hold on to that theology, but for my part of the journey, I just had to let it go.
Mm-hmm. What you say about going into church and into temples resonates with me because, as the audience may know, I was raised in a left-wing Jewish family. Yes, we were Marxists. And I did not get spiritual at all in any formal way until I joined the Contact movement, or I should say network.
Yes.
But as a child, even though I was told that the most important books to read was Das Kapital by Karl Marx.
Oh yeah, Karl Marx. Yes.
And other Marxists. I always felt that there was something very special about going into a church or a synagogue, and I experienced a sense of peace and a sense of, I won't say reassurance, but it was just a great comfort for reasons that I could never understand, and I think I had a desire to have a spiritual life that my political activism during my youth and my involvement with left-wing causes just couldn't provide. And it's interesting, I never prayed until I joined the Contact Network. And one of my colleagues in the network, who also a physician, recommended that I get a book called Recovering the Soul by Dr. Larry Dossey, who wrote a book about unbounded mind, unbounded consciousness.
Yes.
And he gave instructions as to how one could pray. And so I decided I was going to do this. Now, I've never shared this information ever before on the radio, or I don't even think I've even written about it except as a letter once. And that is, I decided I was going to pray, and the instructions were, don't try to tell the infinite what to do. Say, do the right thing, do what is natural, thy will be done. And I just put out to the universe, and I visualized a friend of my wife's, a woman who was also married to a left-wing doctor and was having marital problems. And you know how women, when they are close, they spend a lot of time calling each other and supporting each other. And so my wife was on the phone every day for an hour, sometimes two, with her friend, and trying to encourage her because it was a very hard time. It looked like her friend was going through a divorce. So I prayed for her friend, and this was the first time in my life I ever prayed. And I said, do the right thing, do what is natural. I mentioned her name, thy will be done. And I did this with great passion, 15, 20 minutes, several times a day. I'd do my meditation,
Yeah.
which was part. And this is very strange because a week after I started this exercise, of course, my poor wife was mortified because she knew me as Joe Burkes, the dialectical materialist. She was imagining that I was going to follow a guru to some Himalayan mountaintop, abandon her and the children, stop paying the house note, and she would be house poor, and I would be on my vision quest. So she didn't tell a soul what I was doing. But a week later, she comes back to me with a story that her friend said to her, to my wife, that suddenly she started feeling very peaceful. And these were her exact words. She said, as if someone were quietly praying for me.
Oh, my God.
So right there, I had a validation that I was on the track, and I was very grateful that my prayer had been answered, and I was able to get feedback in terms of its efficacy.
Yeah, yeah. I'm very familiar with Brother Dossie's work. I have several books here by him. He was a combat medic in Vietnam and has created quite a. And I think his wife is a nurse or a retired nurse. Yeah, wonderful mind he has.
Larry Dossie, and for people who want to pick up that book, it's still in print.
Yes, it is.
Larry Dossie, the book is Recovering the Soul. And I make the joke now that I'm a former dialectical materialist doing a 12,000-step spiritual recovery work to help me become more enlightened and spiritual. So that's where then. And this program is very good therapy if one is doing a spiritual recovery work. So I do thank you. We're going to go for a little bit of housekeeping now. We're a half an hour into the show. And so please stay tuned. I'm going to talk to you about our program, Epic Voyages. And I'm urging all of you out there to visit us at epicvoyages.com for up-to-date information about our exciting Epic Voyages projects and to view our upcoming radio show topics. From there, you can link to our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and of course, subscribe to our YouTube page. You can catch us every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, by simply going to your computer or your smartphone and dialing InceptionRadioNetwork.com. Plug that in. IRN provides you with several opportunities to tune in and not miss a beat. This includes listening to us live on your television set via Roku TV's set-top media player. You can download the IRN app on your Android, iPhone, BlackBerry, and Amazon smartphone, or through their syndicated streaming partners like TuneIn, iTunes, and Google Play Music. This show is also available on your car stereo via Stitcher Radio's Vehicle Dashboard app. And lastly, even if your power goes out, you can listen to us through an old-fashioned tethered phone line by simply dialing 401-283-6700. That's 401-283-6700. This show is broadcast every Friday night on Dark Matter Digital Network at 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific. And if you absolutely can't catch us on the air, don't worry. You can catch this show as well as hundreds of past Epic programs by visiting irnshows.com. irnshows.com. We invite you to join our conversation through IRN's interactive chat room at irnchat.com. You can also get your questions and comments to us by Skyping Inception Radio Network or dialing 888-919-2355 or 888-919-BELL. And now that we've taken care of housekeeping, I'd like to tell the audience that my name is Dr. Joseph Burkes, and we have with us Reverend Michael Carter talking about his exciting contact experiences that started in 1989 and apparently have continued, although less intense, to this current day. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's been less intense. It was hot and heavy for a while. Usually the summers can really get going, but it's been a journey. They're less frequent, but always they could pop up and they could come tonight after the show. Yeah.
Well, that's exciting possibility. But
Yeah.
they happen to come back on a regular basis during the full and the new moon.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Tell us about that. And you were excited, but also a little bit scared as well. Is that correct?
A lot scared. Lot scared. I had uh, my first wife, Sandy Clark. She doesn't mind me mentioning her name. Um, was an entertainer as well, and she used to work at nightclubs. So she would go and she would work late, and I'm sure these folks knew, but for the most part, they came when she wasn't there, and it was every full and new moon. Um, and
Well, what is the significance of that? Why did you think they put you on a schedule?
I really don't know. Uh, I just knew. Well, the most obvious reason would be it kind of gives me a heads up.
Right.
What also was interesting is, see, I was born on a full moon. I'm a Cancer, so I kind of get really sensitive around a full moon anyway, even without this. So um, it gave me a heads up, and at first it was the paralysis, you see, and I would just couldn't move. I couldn't move, and they
Right.
would show me pictures. They would not talk to me. They would show me pictures,
There was no voice.
telepathy.
There was no voice in your head, but did you sometimes receive information at the level of knowledge, a kind of knowingness?
Well, I got that. I felt more intelligent as these things happened. My physiology changed. My hair grew really quickly. My skin and nails. I got by on less sleep. At that time, I was a Reiki practitioner, and when I started doing Reiki with clients after those initial visits by them, the energy was so amped up. I had one friend call me a liar. She's been a healer. Her name is Rosemarie Starr. She lives in the area. When she first came to me, she called me a liar. She said, and I was a little offended, especially since I was doing this for nothing and she was in my apartment. But she said, this is not Reiki. She says, this is something else. There's no Reiki as strong as this. And then I
Oh.
told her about my
Mm.
experiences. Yeah, but I mean, it was that I get, even now I get by with really not a lot of sleep. But I started exploring different ways of being in the world, different theologies, that kind of thing. They just opened me up. Is the best way I
Mm.
could put it.
Hmm.
And I was just scared because it was like fear and trembling. I was awed. I was awed by them coming.
Hmm.
But it was the fear because they looked so bizarre. I saw the grays, I saw the reptilians, and the healing I had was from a blonde, blue-eyed brother, July 4th, 2013. He healed a blood clot. But those were the three races that I'd seen, and so it's just very bizarre to have someone walk through your bedroom wall,
Hmm.
or just to can't. I couldn't move.
I'd
My
like to.
eyes
I'd
could be
like.
open.
I'd like to stop for a second
Sure.
just to make a point that John Salter, who was a civil rights activist in Mississippi, and he wrote a book about the civil rights struggles in the '60s. He has a Native American background, but he is Caucasian, and he was working at a black college in the Deep South during the initial civil rights struggles, and he wrote a book on that called Jackson, Mississippi, and it's in the library books. And I consider him a real hero. There's a famous photograph of him where the African American students were going to restaurants and having sit-ins, and he was with them in solidarity, and they were attacked, and he was covered with mustard at the diner where they were sitting in, and the headline said they called him Mustard Man because that they thought that was the White Citizens Council thought that was a very funny caption to put on the local newspaper in Jackson, Mississippi. But he was also a contact experiencer, and not around the same time that you had your contact experience in the 80s, he and his son had double missing time while they were driving to the Deep South on a lecture circuit to talk about the early days of the Civil Rights Movement. and he had an onboard experience, and was very friendly. And afterwards, he too noted that his fingernails, which before he could wait a month or two, because he was a man in his late 40s, early 50s at the time, he could wait perhaps a month or two before cutting his nails, but after his close encounter onboard experience, he had to cut his nails every single week. And also, he was a heavy smoker, and he described himself with his pipe, which he did inhale, as he was making as much smoke as an Arizona smelter. And if you've ever been in Arizona around the tin mines and all the other mines, you know what that is, a smoke pouring out. Well, he was heavily addicted, and then he found that after a week or two following his close encounter, he had no desire whatsoever to smoke his pipe. So he had quite a remarkable physiological response. And also smokers, they have lots of lines in their face, that sort of thing. Well, the lines in his face softened as well. Which I guess, if we wanted to promote contact as a cosmetic program, we could say, join the Contact Network, meet strange visitors from other planets. You will be healthier, physiologically stronger, and you will be beautiful. Less wrinkles.
You'll look 20 years younger. I actually have a tape of him.
John Salter. Oh, good.
Yes. Yeah. I'm familiar with some of that story, and he says that. He doesn't. How can I say? He doesn't separate his activism from his contact. He says they go together, and I think you believe that as well, and you're living that.
Absolutely.
You're living that out. Yeah. I just felt more intelligent. I was more open. To other ways of being. I mean, I always was, but it was on steroids at this point. And
so let's take you back to that journey. Now it's 1989, 1990. You've been regressed by Dr. Moody. Is that correct? Yeah. And then you also went to Bud Hopkins. Yeah. Was there any difference in the content of what you recalled under hypnosis? That was any different between the two hypnotherapists as well as what you recalled without hypnosis? Was there any different information or significance that came out of it?
No, I mean, they both affirmed and confirmed what had happened to me. With both of them, I was taken on a ship, but I had no recollection of that. But it came up, the description of the ship. I didn't know, but there are no corners. And there was a light, but I did not see where this light was coming from. There was a light, but I don't know how the room was lit.
Mm-hmm. This is also described in the literature, where a room appears to be self-illuminated without any light bulbs or sconces or anything like that.
Yes. And I was laying on my back. I was hysterical. I went back to both those. With Bud, I went back to the encounter that I did with Jane Mundy. I'm sorry, Dr. Jane Mundy. I'm getting Raymond Moody.
Yeah, I made that mistake.
He does the MDE stuff. Yeah.
Right. Thank you for correcting. Moody and Moody.
Yes, I mean both brilliant human beings, and so. But what I did was I talked about it, but I never talked about my own experiences. In other words, I presented it as research, but I never talked about my own experiences. And of course, I was standing on the shoulders of so many. Dr. Barry Downing, retired Presbyterian minister, who wrote a book back in '68 called The Bible and Flying Saucers. Morris K. Jessup, who died under mysterious circumstances back in the 50s, had written a book on religion and UFOs. There was a woman by the name of Reverend Virginia Brasington, from where, of all places, Asheville, North Carolina. I have her book on UFOs and the Bible. So that gave me the courage and the impetus to pursue it. The only difference between myself and the esteemed clergy I just met was that I was an experiencer and they weren't.
That's an important distinction.
It is.
For sure. So you had no conscious memory of an onboard experience until you went through the hypnosis. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Did you were quite frightened during that?
Yes.
Did they examine you? Did they subject you to medical procedures or any kinds of healing?
Yeah. This is what had happened. But I had a needle stuck in the back of my head. I was paralyzed. I could open and close my eyes, but that was it, which was very rare because sometimes it scared me more because if my eyes were closed when they came, I couldn't open them, but they would show me pictures of what they were doing. One day, they showed me the head of a syringe, and I felt this prick right in the back of, where the bottom of your head, where your neck goes up into the back of your head. I don't know what that space is called there.
Well,
you can feel it.
There's the brain stem and all the vital structures in that. It's not a place where doctors usually like to put needles unless they absolutely have to.
Well, these folk did. And I mean, it was excruciating. And I remember screaming so hard that I kind of forced my eyes open and forced the paralysis to stop. And I talked to a friend of mine who was a psychic. I said, I'm not getting any sleep. I don't know. I can't keep doing this. I'm tired, but I want it at the same time. So he said, you should talk to them. Mm-hmm. You should talk to them. It's going to sound stupid. You'll be walking around your house. No one is there, but you should tell them. Lay some boundaries out. And I did. I remember Sandy saying to me, I saw you standing in your underwear, walking around the house, talking to people. She said, very strange. But like a week or 10 days later, I was paralyzed. She was out. My eyes are closed. I can't open them. There's a picture of a syringe. And ever so gently, I feel in the top of my crown this little pinprick. And they listened. It was so gentle. Now, what did that do? My intuition was on steroids. I could always see auras around people, but it just became even more intense. I can look at the human body. On a summer day, if I'm on a beach and people have a tan, if I look at them, I can see their skeletal system. It's just all this. Now, so that hurt, but good came out of it. But other than that, I didn't have any anal probes or anything like Bud's people had. And I'm not saying they didn't. I'm just saying I didn't. But the biggest healing was July 4th, 2013, when I had a blood clot on my right leg from my ankle up to the groin area. A brother came in my room with one of those cowls on that the monks used to wear back in the 12th and 13th century. He was so built, you could see the muscles rippling through, I call it a hoodie, but it's a cowl. And I turned around and he put his hand out. It was his left hand, I believe. And this apple green ray came out of his hand, hit me in my abdomen. I felt nothing, and he just dissolved, like just these particles just dissolved. I was, of course, wide awake, as I am always after this. I can't tell you the amount of energy. Well, you're an experiencer, and I started calling people on the West Coast, who just to tell them because I knew someone was up. I called Preston Dennett. He has a wonderful book called UFO Healings. As a matter of fact, when I told him this,
I know Preston. He was in my contact team from 1992 to 1994.
I called him, but he wasn't home. Eventually, I did call him and tell him. He said he's going to put it in his new book. He's working on a volume 2 of UFO Healings. But anyway, the next morning when I got out of bed, and I'm a very thin person. My leg with the blood clot, I was like LeBron James. I wish I had legs that big. After they left, my legs were normal.
Now let's talk a little bit about this because, first of all, thrombophlebitis and deep venous thrombosis are potentially life-threatening illnesses.
Yes.
many, many people die of sudden death because of pulmonary embolus. The clot is formed in the vein. Remember, there's arteries, blood coming from the heart to the tissues, and then veins bring them from the tissues back to the heart. Now, if a clot is that massive, usually requires immediate treatment with blood thinners, because if blood thinners are not offered, a part or even a whole blood clot can break off, travel up the inferior vena cava to the heart, and can go to the lung and cause what's called pulmonary infarction, which can be, if it's massive enough, can be fatal. So you had a diagnosis of deep venous thrombosis. Had you seen the doctor?
Yeah, what had happened was my ex, my first ex, I was telling, because I've never had this before, and she said, "You're not supposed to be in that much pain. If I put a like a folder on my leg, it would be excruciating pain." I thought I had pulled something. So after 3 days, she said, "Listen, you didn't listen to me when you were married to me, but you need to listen to me now. You need to go right away tomorrow morning and get that checked out." I said, "Yeah, maybe I will." But I wasn't going to. The pain was so intense. So I go to my primary. And he says, "Did you drive here? Do you need a cab?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "You need to get down." I had to get an ultrasound. It was so massive. And he said, "If it bursts," I said, "Don't tell me. It'll ruin my day." He said, "Exactly." So I was injecting myself with enoxaparin in my stomach area to try to thin out the blood. And then later I was on the Coumadin, Wayfarin.
Now, how far into this treatment did the healing occur from the extraterrestrial?
I would say probably a week.
1 week.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I can tell you from my clinical experience as a physician that when you have a massive venous thrombosis extending, as you said, from the ankle to the groin, you can have considerable swelling, like you said, looked very, very plump. But it takes about a month of treatment for the swelling to go down completely in many cases.
Yeah.
And now you're on your blood thinner for a week. And did you see a improvement in the swelling before the extraterrestrial arrived?
No, I really didn't. And see what was so, I was getting, you go and they they stick your finger with the needle to see the blood levels and all that. The biggest challenge I had was trying to explain to the doctor how this happened so quickly.
So doctors took note. How soon after the healing did you see the doctors caring for you for this deep venous thrombosis?
Yeah, about 5 days.
And did they remark that the swelling had gone down considerably?
He was not happy.
Why
because
was that?
That's what I asked him. I mean, I didn't tell him that a blonde, blue-eyed person, maybe a Palladian or a Nordic figure, who was almost as tall as my ceiling. No, I didn't tell him that. But he kept saying, "Yeah, but you were just here just a week or so ago when we were doing these tests. And there's no way your leg could have gotten to that size in that bit of time." And I just kept going back and forth. And then finally I said, "Are you happy for me?" And he looked at me. I said, "Aren't you happy that I'm well?" He said, well, of course. I said, "Well, can we just leave it at that?" And he said, "Fine." And so they wanted me to stay on the Coumadin for 6 months. And he said, "I will stop you after 3 months."
Right.
And that was the story.
Yeah. So you healed very rapidly with friends, assistance from high places. So that's an amazing story. I look forward to reading about it in Preston Dennett's second edition, or I should say part 2 of UFO healings.
Yes.
We have about 10 more minutes for this segment, and I wanted to say that your experience propelled you on quite a journey, and tell me about how you were able to integrate this experience with your work as a minister.
Well, because of the TV show Ancient Aliens, I was starting to get. I shot several episodes for them as a consultant, and TV people were starting to hear about me. And there were several people who came out to the church. Some people had gone to my website and said they were going to come, and I was very clear with them. This is not a UFO church. I do not preach anything or any UFO theology from my pulpit, but you are more than welcome to come. But what I would do sometimes in my talks or sermons is I may quote Whitley Strieber. I'd let them know that I'm very much into, I do believe in reincarnation. It was like I would give them bite-sized, well, just so they knew where I was coming from. I wasn't laying a trip on them. And by then, it was also some celebrity because people were buying my books and they knew I was there. So it was win-win for everybody. More people came out of curiosity. Sometimes I would drop some data or something about life on other planets, perhaps, or the possibility of it. And so it was not a big deal. There was one person who tried to get me in a lot of trouble. My minister believes in UFOs. My minister is on TV talking about UFOs and religion, but the board, because in the UU denomination, our polity is we don't have a diocese or a pope or whatever. We have democratically elected people from the congregation.
Could you spell it out? Because many people don't know it as Unitarian Universalist, is that correct?
Unitarian Universalist, yes, UU for short. And so I really work for the board. The long story short is my board said, what's the harm? He's not forcing his beliefs on anybody. There probably is life on other planets, and what's the big deal? And so they stepped up. I love it because this woman could have made my life miserable.
Sure. And I think in your book you also describe what appears to me to be a paradox, that on one hand people have a belief, if they're Christian, that a great rabbi, a great teacher, a son of God, was crucified and then rose up from the dead. That happened 2,000 years ago. And yet, how did you say it? Something about our experiences seem impossible to them.
Well, I'm just saying that what they're saying they believe is, we're not saying anything different. You expect us to believe, if we're not following that line of thought, that a human being was put to death on a Roman cross, that this person walked on water, that this person was great psychic ability and what have you, and you expect us to believe that. Well, I'm just trying to say, well, maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe if we look at his story a different way, if we look at angels in the Bible and put E.T., if we start looking at it in a different way, maybe that can explain some of these so-called miracles from the ministry of this good Rabbi Jesus. That's all I'm saying. And that's what I've been trying to explore and just give people another paradigm. I could be wrong.
Well, whether right or wrong, it's certainly a fascinating discussion, and I'd like to hear more about we've mentioned Jesus' ministry. What about the Old Testament? What parts of the Old Testament for you suggests possible extraterrestrial contact?
Well, the book of Isaiah. Let's look at Isaiah. Dr. King loved Isaiah, so did Jesus. Jesus quoted it when he said, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me and given me the good news to preach to the poor." I'm looking at the book of Isaiah now, and this is the New Revised Standard Version. I also have the Hebrew Tanakh, which is the English translation of the Hebrew. But if we look at Isaiah 40, verse 22, Isaiah says this: "It is he who sits above the circle of the earth, and its inhabitants are like grasshoppers, who stretches out the heavens like a curtain." And, I raised this question in seminary. How did this man know that the earth was a sphere? And, yeah, and he's looking down. Its inhabitants are like grasshoppers. Now, I was taught that people thought the world was flat until Columbus. So here we have Isaiah 5,000 years ago, not only saying that the earth is a sphere, but the inhabitants are like grasshoppers, which means he's looking down on the earth. I look at the Ezekiel. And his encounter with the wheel, which of course the late NASA scientist Joseph Blumrich used all the measurements and the metrics of what Ezekiel saw, and came up with a wonderful book, The Spaceships of Ezekiel, with his version of what Ezekiel saw. Again, these Hebrew prophets, and they were going to the power structures of their day, and they were saying, "Thus saith the Lord, that you must treat the widow, the child, the poor, the indigent as your neighbor." There's a social justice component along with this ministry. Now, I'm looking at Jeremiah in the Hebrew Bible. This is where I get to the point where I think that this God is an extraterrestrial. He's got anger management problems. He's bloodthirsty.
You're talking about the angry
I'm talking
God.
About Yahweh.
The angry God of the Old Testament, yes.
Right. And he says here, is Jeremiah 13, verse 14, "I will smash them one against the other, parents and children alike, declares the Lord. No pity, compassion, or mercy will stop me from destroying them." I don't want to worship a God like that. I don't believe that is a God. I think Yahweh has a lot of issues, and he's one of many races that are vying for power over the earth. But I believe that our ancestors are trying to say, look, these beings are gods, or because of their technology.
Mm-hmm. There's something, and we're going to get into that more during the second part of our show. Sure. When you would share this with your congregation, did you get feedback in terms of how they were accepting this approach?
Well, I don't share it from the pulpit. People have bought the book. I did ask my Old Testament professor, Dr. Phyllis Tribble, excellent mind in Old Testament studies, and the words that impressed me was that she said, "I don't know." She didn't try to explain it away. She didn't say, "What, are you crazy for asking me that?" She said, "I don't know." That was fine. That was fine.
That's an honest and straightforward answer.
Yes.
Rather than making something up, she admits we don't know. And that, as a physician, a lot of our job is to do the same. I don't know what you've got, I would tell patients, but I know it's not this, that, and the other thing, that all of which can hurt you. So it's okay not knowing what you have, because it doesn't fall into a category that could seriously affect your health. We're now coming to the end of our first hour. Please stay tuned during our commercial break, after which we're coming back. You're listening to Epic Voyages on the Inception Radio Network. My name is Dr. Joseph Burkes, and our honored guest, is Reverend Michael Carter. We're going to go now to the break, and stay tuned.